Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
You know, life can be very serendipitous at times. And I will explain what it is that I'm talking about here in just a moment. But speaking of life, we never know when it's going to end. And I don't want to sound macabre or, anything else. And I'm definitely, not expecting to die anytime soon. I sure as hell hope I don't. Because, there's still a lot of stuff that I want to do. There's a lot of stuff that I want to accomplish. But before I get into the thing about how life is serendipitous, I want to sort of relay a story of what happened to me yesterday when my life literally flashed before my eyes. Now, this is not the first time that I have almost died. And it probably will not be the last. And I know it's not funny. I'm chuckling, but almost dying is very serious. And I guess I'm laughing about it because I've, stared in the face of death one too many times and said, not today. And if you don't understand the quote, that's from Game of Thrones, where I forget the character, but he says, that there's but one thing that we say to death, and that is not today. So yesterday, I was having lunch with some people at a Bitcoin meetup in Keene, New Hampshire, and, I took an overzealous bite of chicken. And I thought I had properly chewed my bite of chicken before trying to swallow said bite of chicken, and it got stuck in my throat. And I've had to do the Heimlich on myself before. And I know not too many people can say that, and I should not actually have said Heimlich because I now, according to some federal order, would have to wind up paying money to the estate of Dr. Heimlich for creating said maneuver. But whatever, I'm going to go ahead and say Heimlich anyway, because most people, if you say abdominal thrust procedure, they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. So anyway, yesterday, took an overzealous bite of chicken, and I'm trying to swallow, and it didn't go down. And then I took a sip of something because, sometimes when you drink something, it'll help wash whatever is stuck go down. And I didn't have enough drink left in my cup to actually cause that to work. And so I got up and started walking, and I was hitting myself in the chest, trying to get it to come up. And yes, I know when you do the abdominal thrust, you're supposed to hit from below, but I, for some reason, couldn't get that spot good enough, so I was just hitting myself in the chest. And the two people that I was with, they then realized, oh no, something is wrong with Darryl. And so the one guy said, do you need me to do the Heimlich? And I just shook my head, yes, because I couldn't talk because I was choking on a piece of chicken. And the other guy that was with us was like, I don't know how to do it. And so the first guy was like, I think I know how. And so I was like showing him on myself how to do the Heimlich. And so then in the middle of this restaurant, and luckily it was not a crowded restaurant because I imagine that people would have started freaking out seeing this guy almost die in the restaurant while they're trying to enjoy enchiladas and chimichangas. So anyway, he does the abdominal thrust procedure on me, and the piece of chicken came out. And then I realized how big of a piece of chicken it was, and I was like, oh, okay, this should have been cut into like 3 little pieces. But anyway, I wound up not dying yesterday, but I did for one of the many times saw my life sort of flash before my eyes. But that's not about how life is serendipitous, although kind of it is. because I've been listening to several podcasts recently. One of them, the School of Greatness. Another one, listening to the School Sucks podcast. And also listening to the Lava Flow and Liberty Entrepreneurs. And I think I've got another podcast or two in my podcatcher. But one thing that's really interesting, and this is where the serendipitous thing comes into play. One thing that's really interesting is the 2 episodes of School Sucks that I listened to most recently. It was a 2-part interview that Brett Venat did with Nathan Frazier from Live Free FM. And they were talking about how do you accomplish goals, how do you set out your task, how do you determine what your goals are going to be, what sort of routine do you have, do you have a daily routine? And this is something that I would not say that I have a routine per se. I have patterns that I go through. There are things that I do every day. There are things that I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There are things that I do generally on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Sometimes I do it on Sunday. There are things that I specifically do on Sunday. So I don't have routines per se, but I definitely have patterns. But these are not written down anywhere. So if I somehow wound up with another concussion, which I get those quite frequently, and you would know if you have listened to the show previously, or maybe you've listened to the show a bunch and you got a concussion and then had some bout of amnesia. But that's where I was going. So like if I wound up, getting another concussion and then getting amnesia, I have nothing written down of what it is that I do every day. What is my pattern? What are my routines? What sort of things do I do? I know that, okay, I need to do the news. I need to write the news. I need to look up the precious metal spot prices. I need to look up the price of Bitcoin before I record the news. These are the websites that I go to get the news when I'm compiling. These are the various things that I do. I check my email. This is where I go to find the information for affiliate relations phone calls for Free Talk Live. This is where I do this. This is where I post these things. So I have, in a couple of files here and there, some of the stuff of where I post certain information from the various podcasts, but I don't necessarily have it written down somewhere like, here's my daily routine. But one thing that I noticed that both Nathan and Brett do is there are certain routines that they do. And there was something that was mentioned, the 5-minute journal, I think is what it was called, to where you spend 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening, and you write down not necessarily daily affirmations, but, like, here's things that I'm grateful for. And there's a couple other things, and I don't remember the details, and I've not looked into the 5-minute journal, but it's something that I definitely want to look into. And this is where the serendipitous thing comes in, because I was thinking about, like, things that I need to do, because I had a phone call with somebody about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago maybe, to where they were asking about, is there stuff that I do that helps me do my routine? Like, is there something that, is there an application that could help me do what it is that I do? And I was like, no, not really. Like, I know what needs to be done, but I don't have it written down. And I'll continue my weird train of thought here.
In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So, continuing with my weird train of thought, and yes, this show is going to be a lot more like, into the mind of Darryl sort of thing, and hopefully it resonates with somebody out there listening, because, like, one of the reasons that I do the show is, to share my views and my opinions, but also to hopefully wind up, connecting with people and reaching people and, relaying information that I think is beneficial. And sometimes it's beneficial to, say, like, here's what's on my mind, here's things that I'm dealing with, because chances are somebody else is dealing with the same sort of thing. And it's one of those things to where, and I'll get back into the goals thing and, like how life is serendipitous in just a moment. But this kind of is related to a goal, to where last year I was listening to an episode of Penn Sunday School. And I was not necessarily paying 100% attention because I was listening while I was getting other stuff done. And I heard Penn mention about having lost a bunch of weight. He lost like 80 pounds in 90 days by doing a 1,000-calorie-a-day diet. And he was working with a nutritionist and doing a bunch of other stuff. And I was like, okay, if he can do this, if this guy can lose 80 pounds in 90 days, then I can lose some weight too. And because it's one of those things to where, for years I've been saying, like, I want to lose weight, and every now and then I'll get motivated to try and lose some weight, and then I'd lose like 20 or 30 pounds, and then I'd sort of hit a wall, and I couldn't lose anymore, and then I'd be like, oh, well, I can't get down to where I want to go, so screw it, and I'd get fat again. And so this happened for years and years and years. And so finally it was that motivating factor of I heard a success story, and I said, I can do that too. So that's sort of what I'm relaying here in this episode of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. But it's not really a success story, but it's, like, hey, this is something that's motivated me. Maybe it can motivate you too. Maybe it can, give you something that 6 months down the road or 3 months or, a week or whatever, at some point in life, I want somebody to be able to say, yes, Darryl said something that wound up triggering something in me. And I realize the word trigger now has like all sorts of weird negative connotations, but I don't mean it in that way. But, like Darryl said something that resonated, and so that motivated me too. And so this is sort of my story of Brett and Nathan said something that resonated with me and motivated me too. And then it wasn't just Brett and Nathan on that episode, or actually those 2 episodes of School Sucks. I also heard the next thing that was in my podcatcher was an episode of School of Greatness. And the thing that they began talking about was, what's your routine? What do you do every morning? And how do you work on your goals? And the thing that I realized was, wait a second, these are 2 totally different, unrelated podcasts, but they're both talking about the same thing. They're both talking about how do you make goals, how do you set your goals, how do you work towards your goals. And I remember hearing something a while back, and I forget the exact wording of it, but it was something about a dream without a plan is just a dream, but once you add a plan to it, it becomes a goal, and once you do something, then it becomes this. And so there's this sort of pattern to how you take your dream into being reality. And I don't necessarily know off the top of my head, like what would I have as a 6-month goal? What would I have as a 1-year goal? What would I have as a 5-year goal? But it's definitely something that I need to look into using some sort of like an organizational tool. Again, because I know what needs to be done, and I'm pretty efficient at doing what it is that I need to do, but every now and then I wind up thinking I need to do something, like I need to do X. And then a couple hours later, I forget what X was. And then it's like 3 days later, I'll remember, oh, yes, I was supposed to have done this a week ago. So I need some sort of organizational tool, and there were several different things that they had mentioned, Workflowy being one of them, something called Evernote, and then there are other things. There's something that I read about called Habitica, it's the word habit, Habit, and then ICA. So Habitica.com, where basically you turn your life into sort of a video game sort of thing, where like you don't actually like walk around with a remote control and press like L2 or the X button or anything, but you assign daily tasks to yourself online on this site, and then after you complete the task, you mark it off, and then you get points. And then after you accumulate a certain number of points, you sort of get to level up. And so it's something that I might wind up looking into that one. I might look into some of these other things. But one of the things that was mentioned, not just in the School Sucks episode, but also in the episode of the School of Greatness, was you have the goal, and then you have to have subtasks to help you accomplish the goal. And then there's also the, I forget the term, but it's one of those things to where reptiles, for example, and I realize that this is a horrible analogy, but reptiles will grow as large as their environment allows them to do so. And it's the same way with goals, to where you will allow yourself as much time to accomplish a goal as you give yourself. And I realize that seems like a very self-evident thing of, yes, if I give myself until 6 o'clock tonight to accomplish a task, I will have it accomplished by 6 o'clock. But the example that was given in one of the episodes was, if you say, I'm going to have the garage clean by the end of the weekend, you might goof off for Friday evening, most of Saturday, and then you rush on Sunday afternoon to wind up cleaning the garage so that you can sit down and have a beer and watch the football game Sunday night. So you wind up taking as much time to accomplish the goal as the amount of time that you give yourself. So you need to have these sort of sub-goals, and also the sub-goals sort of help you realize what steps need to be taken to accomplish the goal. The example that I think Nathan gave of, if you're planning a trip across the country, you don't wait until every light is green between here and California, or if you're in California, between California and New Hampshire. You don't have to wait on every light to be green. You don't have to wait on like everything to line up just perfectly. But you do have to do certain steps. You have to pack the car. You have to get in the car. You have to make sure there's gas in the car. And then there are other things, like you have to begin driving. You have to get on the interstate, and et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with goals, to where if you just walk in and say, I need to clean the kitchen, and your dish or your sink is full of dishes and the floor is a mess, you're like, well, I don't know where to begin. So you need to give yourself these sub-task sort of things. And that's something that I need to work on in giving myself some task and organizing a little bit better. Stay tuned.
Why do they hate us? Is libertarianism compatible with Islam? Davi Barker answers these questions and more in Voluntary Islam and Other Essays. He advances the voluntarist cause with analysis of the confluence of values between Islam and libertarianism, as well as contemporary movements from the Tea Party to the Arab Spring. Voluntary Islam by Davi Barker is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
So before I sort of finish my train of thought here on organization and other sort of serendipitous-like things, I want to make sure that I tell you about Liberty.me. No, Liberty.me is not an organizational tool. It's a place that you can go and communicate with other liberty-minded people. It's a social network designed specifically for people that love the ideas of liberty. And I know that some people are going to say, it's just an echo chamber. But really, any social media outlet can become an echo chamber if you make it into one. I know that there are a lot of people that I have removed from my Facebook friends list because I don't want to see their post advocating things that are completely contrary to what I believe. It's not that I'm, not strong enough in what I believe to have an intelligent conversation with them. It's that I don't want to spend all of my time focusing on having conversations on social media, trying to persuade somebody that what they're supporting is wrong. I've got better things to do. And that fits back into the whole organizational thing, right? Of making sure that you're using your time wisely. And I think it would be a lot better use of social media time to be around people that think and, hold similar beliefs as you. So, Liberty.me, and of course it's more than just a social networking website. There are things on there that you don't find on traditional social media. There are free ebooks, there's audio content, and so much more. Go to Liberty.me. When you sign up, use referral code FPP Radio and save 10%. That's Liberty.me, referral code FPP Radio. So something else that I want to talk about that I had heard on some of these podcasts that I was listening to recently, and really the only reason that I really started listening to podcasts recently, and I know that sounds weird, right? Like I've had my own podcast for like 3.5, 4 years, but I just recently really started listening to podcasts. It's because I've been, working on a pig farm, house sitting for a friend of mine. And so I've had time of, I got tired of listening to a really badly tuned in station in the basement while I make pig food. So I want to listen to something. So really when I got the new phone, I was like, all right, let me download one of these podcast aggregator things. And so I downloaded one, and, it makes it easy to be able to listen to podcast instead of having to intentionally go over to a website and then whatever. The podcatchers make it really easy. So if you have a podcatcher on your phone, then add Peace, Love, Liberty Radio or actually add all of the FPP radio shows that I do. So there's the daily 5-minute newscast, there's this show, the 30-minute thrice weekly show, and then there's also the weekly commentary sort of podcast that I do that's the FPP Freedom Minute. So add one or two or all three, and yes, there are separate RSS feeds for all three of the shows, plus there's a catch-all RSS. But so it's when I got the new phone, and because I've been pig-sitting and house-sitting, that I really started listening to podcasts. And so, again, this is sort of the serendipitous sort of thing, right? So I started listening to these various podcasts, and I stumbled across the School of Greatness when I saw something on, I think, Facebook about, hey, check out this interview that somebody did with Alanis Morissette. She talks about homeschooling. And so I was like, oh, that seems pretty cool. And so, I listened, and there's a lot of really good liberty ideas that come out in this School of Greatness podcast. And it's not promoted as a liberty podcast. It's promoted as basically a motivational podcast where they have encouraging stories, uplifting stories. And one of the things that has, been basically in the last 4 or 5 podcasts that I've listened to has been talking about overcoming fears. And that's something that I have really struggled with in one aspect of my life over, I would say, really strongly the last decade. And I don't want to, delve too deep into, this is all personal about Darryl, but this entire episode of the podcast is basically me needing to say things to someone, and, well, you're that someone, right? Because, I'm kind of an introvert of some sorts. I refer to myself quite frequently as a workaholic hermit, and I recently saw something that I have never heard this term before, extroverted introvert. And I think I might be one of those, because when I take the Myers-Briggs test, I always wind up being, somewhere near 50-50 on the extrovert/introvert. It's like 51-49, 53-47. It fluctuates, but basically I'm an extroverted introvert. And it's one of the things that most introverts wind up struggling with, and that would be dating relationships. And that's really the thing. Like, my biggest fear is rejection. And I know it seems really strange that, I put myself out there on, most things to where, I can discuss politics all day long. You reject my arguments on politics. Okay, no big deal. That's not personal. As far as I see it, if you are rejecting what I'm saying about politics or about anything else, then you're rejecting the idea. You're not rejecting me, the person. But when it comes to dating relationships, it's totally different, right? Or at least the way I see it is totally different, to where it is a much more personal rejection. And that's something, again, I've struggled with. I would say, most of my life as, from puberty onwards is dealing with that rejection, to where, I didn't get a lot of dates in high school, didn't really date in college, wound up meeting someone about a year after college, wound up moving basically across the country for this person, wound up getting married, had what in hindsight was an absolutely horrible marriage that never should have happened. And then the next couple of years was incredibly difficult for me, dealing with a custody battle and other things. And so I intentionally, did not try to date for a couple of years. And then it was, okay, I'm ready to try dating. And then rejection. And yeah, I would have a couple dates here and there, but again, it's a lot more of a personal rejection of I as a person am being rejected. So that is sort of the big fear that I have, where most people, they, have fears about losing their job or, losing something that they find important, like a possession or, something else. But my biggest fear, and I don't know how to overcome this, but my biggest fear is being rejected as a person. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I actually enjoyed doing it. I really enjoyed doing it. And don't forget, send me your questions for the AMA at fppradio.com.